I left the fork in the sink on purpose. Not because I forgot. I wanted her to notice it. One single fork, prongs up, water beading off the metal like it had just finished crying. That was all I left behind. No toothbrush. No shoes by the door. Not even my smell on the pillow. Just a spotless apartment and one stupid, soaking fork. That's how she'd know I was serious. She'd walk in, full of laughter from dinner with her boss, not knowing the silence waiting for her had weight. I imagined her unlocking the door. Click. Push. Lights on. Everything clean. Too clean. At first, maybe she'd smile. Think I finally grew up and wiped the counters. Maybe she'd say something cute like, "Milo, you reorganized the fridge?" She'd call out my name. Once. Twice. Nothing. She'd open the closet. Gone. Look under the bed. Nothing. Bathroom drawer. Empty. Then she'd notice the fork. She'd stare at it, not knowing why it made her feel sick. But it would. Because it was deliberate. Because I never leave forks in the sink. I was methodical with everything, especially with how I disappeared. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning this since March. Not the leaving. The way I'd leave. The fork. The silence. The erased presence. I wanted it to haunt her. She thought I was spineless. Thought I'd always be here. Thought she could drip back into this place after every late client dinner with that glorified haircut she calls a boss and expect me to pretend like we still made sense. But I was done pretending. And when I left, I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just locked it from the outside and walked into the rain with a backpack and a receipt from the dry cleaner. That's the funny part. I left the dry cleaning in the closet. Didn't even take the suit. Didn't need it anymore. Not where I was going. But I did take something. And she wouldn't realize it was gone. Until it was far too late. She came home at 9:38 p.m. I know because I watched the hallway security feed from my phone. I'd installed a hidden cam in the smoke detector months ago, not because I didn't trust her, but because I knew I couldn't. There's a difference. She stood outside the door longer than usual. Maybe she sensed it. The weight behind the door. The absence. Maybe she was rehearsing something. Some lie about the client dinner, or how her boss invited the whole team last minute. Or maybe she was drunk. Either way, she hesitated. Then the door opened. Light spilled in. She walked into a crime scene without a body. Everything was in place, but somehow deeply wrong. The couch cushions were too straight. The plants watered but unnaturally rotated. No shoes by the door. No jacket on the hook. No keys in the bowl. My presence had been surgically removed, except for that one dripping fork in the sink. A relic. A breadcrumb. A message. I watched her stand in the kitchen, not moving, just absorbing. Like her brain was loading, but stuck at 96%. Then she called my name. Not loud. Not frantic. Just a soft, uncertain Milo. Like if she whispered it, she'd summon the version of me who still forgave her. That version didn't exist anymore. She checked the bedroom. Closets. Bathroom. Her voice cracked around the third time she called. Not because she was afraid, but because she realized something she'd never admit. She was alone. For real this time. I imagined her walking to the closet and seeing the space where my boots used to be. The empty hanger where my winter coat always hung crooked. The tiny gap in her shelf where my cologne bottle used to sit. Cheap stuff, but it smelled like safety. All gone. The past 2 years? Vapor. She sat on the edge of the bed like she didn't recognize it. Like the sheets were foreign. That's when she noticed the drawer. I left one open. Just one. Inside was a single Polaroid. Not of her. Not of us. It was her boss's car. Parked outside a hotel. Time-stamped. And taped to the back was a sticky note that read, "You parked in a loading zone. Just like your conscience." Petty? Maybe. But I needed her to know I saw everything. That I'd known for weeks. The texts. The hotel key she kept in the back of her second wallet. The change in her perfume. She wasn't even careful. She just assumed I was too soft to look. She was right. Until I wasn't. What she didn't know is that I wasn't just watching her. I was recording everything. And not for revenge. Not even for closure. But because she was never going to tell the truth, and I refused to let her lie about me when it all came crashing down. I was done being the sad little husband. I was becoming something else. And the first step was vanishing. Most people, when they walk into an empty home and realize their partner is gone, start with the obvious. Call. Text. Panic. Cry. Then eventually, maybe, they call the police. Not Kendra. No missed calls. No voicemails. Not even a "where are you" text. She just stood there, in the middle of our overpriced apartment, staring at the fork in the sink like it was a murder weapon. Then she picked up her phone and called Trent. Yeah, him. The moment I saw his name flash across her screen in the security feed overlay, something inside me twisted. Not jealousy, not rage, just confirmation. Like a lab result you already know is positive, but it still guts you when the email lands. She skipped past concern and dialed her boss. My wife had just found out her husband of 3 years had vanished, and her first instinct was to call the man she swore meant nothing. She said something quiet. I couldn't hear the audio, but I watched her lips. Only caught one word clearly. Gone. Her voice cracked on it. And Trent? That smug, loafers with no socks parasite? He didn't even pause. He said something back that made her sit down, fast, like her knees stopped working. Then she nodded. Once. Twice. Hung up. No emotion. Just resolution. Here's the part that got me. She didn't cry. Kendra has cried at everything. Dead birds on sidewalks. A video of a stray dog finding a home. Even when I dropped a glass once, she welled up. Not from fear, she said, but sudden noise triggers me. But this? Her husband vanishing from her life, like smoke? Nothing. Just a slow walk to the fridge, a glass of water, and silence. She stood at the sink, staring at the city lights, drinking like she was trying to convince herself this was fine. Like she'd rehearsed for this moment. I realized then, she had. Not this exactly, maybe, but a version of it. Some deep part of her had already accepted I wasn't going to stay. That's what betrayal does. It makes the leaving feel overdue. Expected, even. I watched her sleep that night. Not in person. I'm not a monster. Through the bedroom camera, disguised as a wall plug. She curled up on my side of the bed, wrapped in the blanket I always hated. Pulled it tight. No tears. Just tension. Then came the knock. At 3:21 a.m. I froze watching the screen. She sat up, immediately. Not confused. Not startled. Like she'd been waiting for it. She walked to the door barefoot. No robe, no hesitation. Looked through the peephole, then opened it. And there he was. Trent. Hoodie. Cap. No tie tonight. He stepped in. Didn't say a word. Walked straight past her and into the living room like he owned it. Looked around like he was cataloging the scene. His hand ran along the back of the couch. He picked up the fork from the sink and twirled it in his fingers like some kind of villain in a bad movie. And then he said something. I read his lips clearly. He took it. She nodded. What it was, I didn't know yet. But the way they looked at each other? It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was strategy. There's something surreal about watching two people search for something you already stole. Especially when they have no idea you were ever capable of pulling it off. That's what made it so satisfying. They underestimated me so completely that when I finally did something, really did something, it rewired the whole dynamic. Trent sat on the couch, his legs spread like he owned the floor beneath him. Kendra hovered near the kitchen island, arms folded tight. They weren't speaking loudly. I could barely read their lips now. She turned off most of the lights, but I didn't need to. Their body language was louder than anything they could have said. She kept glancing toward the bedroom closet. He kept checking his phone. He wasn't nervous. He was calculating. He thought I was an idiot. An emotional wreck who probably grabbed a duffel bag full of socks and sadness and ran off to my mother's house. But he was missing one detail. The moment I realized he was more than just a work crush, more than just some overconfident middle manager, I started paying attention. And what I found wasn't just infidelity. It was theft, laundering, documents with forged signatures, unreported bonuses. Money moved between shadow LLCs like some back-alley shell game. And here's the fun part. They used my name. Just little things at first. An account with a routing number off by 1 digit, an email address made to look like mine but off by a letter, an e-signature I swear I never gave. But I did give her my login to the home Wi-Fi. I did let her scan my ID for that corporate retreat waiver. I trusted her. Turns out, that was the access point they needed. And once I started digging, once I realized just how deep they'd pulled me into this mess, I knew I couldn't just confront her. If I did that, they'd bury the evidence. Gaslight me. Deny everything. Make me out to be the paranoid husband. So instead, I played dumb. For 5 weeks, I let her lie to my face. Let Trent text her at midnight. Let her fall asleep at the office. I played the role of the naive, slightly pathetic partner. Milo the pushover. Milo the overthinker. Milo, The guy who tears up when the kitchen light flickers because it reminds him of the first night they moved in. But behind the scenes, I was collecting. I made backups, pulled metadata, printed off wire transfers, took photos of receipts, contracts, and things she never would have noticed missing, because she thought I never noticed anything at all. The night she went to dinner with Trent, I didn't just pack a bag. I emptied our fireproof lockbox, took the encrypted USB drive she kept in her jewelry case. I even swapped out the SIM card in her backup phone. She doesn't know I have all of it. She thinks I'm heartbroken. She doesn't realize I'm building a case. And that's why she didn't cry when I disappeared. That's why she called Trent first. Because they both knew something was missing. Not just me, but the digital trail they thought they'd erased. Watching them that night, I noticed something new. Kendra wasn't scared of losing me. She was scared of what I knew. Her silence wasn't heartbreak. It was containment. Trent finally stood up. He walked to the cabinet above the stove, the one we used to keep the aspirin in. He opened it, reached behind the cereal boxes, and pulled out a burner phone. Not hers. His. He dialed fast, turned toward the window. I don't know who he called, but I do know what he said, because this time he spoke louder, and I caught every word. He took the drive. Yeah. No. Listen, if he leaks it, I'm done. You're done. Everyone's done. Then silence. Then, find him. And that's when I realized. They weren't trying to get me back. They were trying to make me disappear a second time. Only this time, not by choice. The first time I noticed I was being followed, I didn't panic. I actually smiled. A real one, not the crooked half grin I've been wearing like a mask for the past year. It was in a grocery store parking lot in Cold Spring, 3 towns over from the life I used to live. A silver sedan, windows tinted, pulling into the spot across from mine a little too quickly. The driver didn't get out, didn't make eye contact, just waited. So I took my time unloading groceries I didn't need, mostly canned soup and bulk trail mix, into the back seat of a car that wasn't mine. I've been rotating rentals every 3 days. Different names, different cards, everything prepaid and anonymous. The man in the silver sedan made one critical mistake. He assumed I was running. He thought I was trying to vanish. But I wasn't hiding. I was editing the story, giving them a new version of events to chase. I wanted them to believe I was alone, scared, paranoid. Because if they were chasing that version of me, they weren't looking at what I was really doing. The truth is, I'd already spoken to someone. Not a cop. Cops are useless in stories like mine. They deal in laws, not leverage. I needed someone who understood leverage. Someone who knew how to handle digital rot, like the files I'd pulled from that USB drive. Financial records. Falsified statements. Payments made to offshore accounts that just happened to pass through our joint tax returns. If anyone looked too closely, I'd be in just as much trouble as they were. That's why I needed a cleaner. Her name's Mallory. We met once, years ago, at a cybersecurity conference I was covering as a freelancer. She ran a panel about online erasure, how to wipe yourself off the grid without triggering red flags. Back then, I thought she was paranoid. Now, I think she's underpaid. She responded to my email exactly 47 minutes after I sent it. Subject line, need to disappear without dying. The body was just a location and the phrase, blue spiral. It was something she'd said in her talk. A kind of professional safe word. If someone used it, they were serious. We met in the back room of a storage facility. She didn't ask what I did. Didn't ask who Kendra was. She looked through the files, scrolled for exactly 4 minutes, and said, "You know they'll try to flip this. Pin it on you." "I know," I said. "Okay," she replied. "Then we need to make you boring. So boring that no one looks twice." She had a plan. Fake job. Fake identity. A digital footprint that made me look like a guy who sold used air conditioners online and moderated a silent meditation subreddit. I'd be invisible not because I was hiding, but because I looked aggressively uninteresting. She gave me a burner phone with no contacts, just one app. No logo. No name. Just a gray circle. "You'll get a notification when it's time to move," she said. Meanwhile, Kendra and Trent were growing desperate. I kept monitoring them through the feeds I hadn't disabled. They tried calling the fake numbers I left behind. Filed a missing persons report. They immediately tried to walk back 2 days later. Probably realized it brought too much attention. I saw footage of Trent in the basement of our apartment building, unplugging the modem and plugging it back in like that would erase what I'd already copied. They were spiraling, and that was exactly what I needed. So I started dropping breadcrumbs. A coffee receipt left at a train station locker in New Jersey. A selfie, blurry on purpose, uploaded to an old message board they didn't know I still had access to. A bus ticket in someone else's name, left in a hotel trash can. I fed them just enough to feel like they were close. Just enough to keep them distracted. Because while they were chasing the ghost version of me, I was talking to someone else. A journalist. Investigative. Niche. The kind who publishes ugly truths without waiting for lawsuits. I didn't give them everything. Just the surface-level dirt. Enough to get Trent's name in the air. Enough to make him sweat. And sure enough, 2 days after that article went live, small blog, no real reach, Trent flew to Chicago. Same day, Kendra emptied the emergency savings account we had just in case one of us got sick. The panic was setting in. What they don't know is that the real files haven't even left my hands. Not yet. This isn't just about revenge anymore. It's about control. They wanted me to vanish. So I did, but on my terms. And now they're chasing shadows, while I decide exactly how this ends. The most effective way to destroy someone who manipulates reality is to give them exactly what they want, but twist the frame just slightly, just enough, so they're forced to see themselves clearly. Not as they imagine, not as they perform, but as they truly are. That's what I did to Kendra. Up until now, everything I leaked was clinical. Numbers, transactions, timelines. I gave the world pieces of Trent, his lies, his laundering, his cowardice. But Kendra? I hadn't touched her yet. She was still clean, still a background character in the public version of the mess. But the thing is, Kendra had one weakness that Trent didn't. He built walls. She built mirrors. Everything about her life was curated, performed. Authenticity was her brand, from the filtered breakfast photos to her little TEDx talk on corporate empathy. She built a following online. Small, but devoted. A few thousand people who thought she was this hyper-aware, morally grounded voice in a plastic world. The kind of woman who tweeted about gender dynamics at work, even as she slept with her married boss behind her husband's back. It was theater, and she was winning, until I changed the script. I didn't post revenge porn. I didn't leak private photos or say anything vile. That would have made me look bitter. I knew better. I simply sent an anonymous tip to a mid-sized online magazine known for exposés on performative feminism in corporate culture. I included a folder titled, The Brand versus the Behavior. It contained screenshots of her internal Slack messages with Trent, laughing at junior employees who complained about workload. Audio snippets I pulled from a voice memo she'd accidentally recorded while drunk, mocking her own mental health posts as algorithm bait. A few internal pitch decks she plagiarized from ex-coworkers, presenting them as her own. I knew the journalist. Not personally, but enough to predict her angle. She wouldn't just accuse, she'd question. Ask readers to connect the dots. Leave enough space for doubt to evaporate. The article dropped quietly, like a pin in a cathedral. It didn't explode. It lingered. And Kendra, she unraveled. I watched it in real time. Not through a camera. I disconnected the feeds. That part of the game was over. I saw it through comments, subtweets, and reaction videos dissecting her silence. She tried to post a clearing the air note, standard corporate tone, something about misinterpretations and weaponized context, but it backfired. People remembered things. Screenshots surfaced. Accounts came forward. Nobody canceled her. They just withdrew. Unfollowed. Unbooked. Unclapped. And Trent? He stayed quiet. Of course he did. He was a shadow always. Let her take the fall while he moved his accounts and contacts and contingency plans offshore. That's how men like him operate, behind women they think are too proud to burn the ship. But this wasn't just about watching her world collapse. It was about what she would do next. I needed to see it. I needed to know who she was without the applause. 3 days after the article dropped, she checked into a small wellness retreat in upstate New York. Not a spa. Something more curated. Unplugged healing and integrative silence. I knew the place. She once sent me a link to it 2 years ago, said she'd go there if she ever had a breakdown. I don't think she remembered that. But I did. I didn't follow her. That wasn't the point. What mattered is that she disappeared from the internet. Not just in shame, but in reflection. The woman who once couldn't eat a sandwich without posting about it suddenly vanished from every feed. And here's the twist. I wasn't happy. I didn't feel the rush I thought I would. Instead, I felt this cold, quiet ache. Like I just finished a movie I waited a decade to see, and halfway through, I realized the villain wasn't who I thought it was. It wasn't Trent. It wasn't even her. It was us. The story of Kendra and Milo was never clean. It was built on loneliness, performance, and mutual denial. We both lied. She lied with words. I lied with silence. And now there was nothing left except noise, headlines, opinions, fragments of our life chewed up and spit into the void. But I still had one more move. One final card to play. Not to destroy her. To finish the story. I had to write it by hand. Not because I thought it would feel more personal, that ship had sailed long ago, but because it forced me to slow down. You don't rage write with a pen. You weigh each word. Feel its shape. Ink demands intention. And this, after everything, had to be intentional. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was something in between. A message not meant to forgive or condemn. Just expose. Not to the public. Not to some journalist. Just to her. She deserved to read it without audience. I mailed the letter to the retreat. Not to her name, but to her room number. I had a contact, someone on the inside. Don't ask how. What matters is that it arrived. No return address. No dramatic flair. Just a plain envelope, sealed in silence. She opened it 3 days after arriving, according to my contact. She'd already settled into the rhythm of isolation by then. No phone, no mirrors, no internet. Just her breath, and whatever ghosts she brought in her luggage. And then, my voice in ink. It began like this. Kendra, you probably expected revenge. Maybe public humiliation. Maybe nothing. But I owe you more than that. I owe you the truth you never let yourself look at. Not mine. Yours. You didn't cheat because you fell in love with Trent. You cheated because you fell out of alignment with who you told the world you were. I watched you become a performance. A brand. A collection of curated beliefs and algorithms. You convinced everyone you were evolved, but you were starving. You didn't betray me for power or status. You betrayed me to feel real again. Because in this quiet, ordinary life, in the uneven floors and overdue bills and takeout containers on the nightstand, you forgot how to be human. And that terrified you. You chose the high-rise conference rooms and catered lies because they numbed the ache. And maybe Trent wasn't the man you wanted, but he made you feel loud again. Visible. Important. But Kendra, you were always visible. To me. Even when you stopped looking at me, I still saw you. I saw you in the way you stirred your tea before fights. In the way you half-smiled when you read bad news. I saw the grief in you. I didn't always know how to help, but I never stopped seeing it. And that's why I left. Not because I hated you, but because I refused to become invisible in my own life. You won't hear from me again. I'm not writing to rebuild anything. This is closure, for both of us. But I needed you to know that I didn't disappear because I was weak. I disappeared because you were never going to stop performing long enough to realize I was standing right in front of you, waiting to be chosen. Take care of the parts of yourself you buried. I hope one day you meet them again. I don't know how she reacted. I don't need to. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't demand applause. It just needs to exist. And once I sent that letter, something inside me finally settled. Not peace. Not joy. But clarity. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without dreaming of her voice. And when I woke up the next morning, something in the air had changed. A text from a blocked number. Just one sentence. He knows where you are. Trent. The game wasn't over. I never replied to Trent's message. I didn't need to. The thing about men like him is that they feed on reaction. They measure control by how fast you flinch. He wanted me scared. He wanted to pull me back into the chaos, the leverage, the dirt. But I'd already won the moment I chose silence over spectacle. When you stop showing up to the war, they don't know who to shoot at. I stayed off the grid another 2 weeks. Changed cities. Grew a beard that I hated. Learned to cook one meal well. Nothing dramatic, just a life small enough to feel like mine again. And then, something happened. I got a job. A simple one. Part-time admin work at a nonprofit community center. No cameras, no press releases, no glass offices. Just quiet. Purpose. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. People looked you in the eye. They remembered your name. One of the volunteers, a retired librarian named Phyllis, brought in lemon muffins every Thursday. No one posted about them. No one filtered them. They just were. It was there I met Ellie. She wasn't flashy. Didn't talk about healing or destiny or reclaiming narratives. She just listened. We stocked shelves together in silence for nearly a week before either of us spoke. And when we finally did, it was about a broken paper towel dispenser and how the smell of old paint reminded her of middle school. It was ordinary, and it was everything I never knew I needed. We didn't fall in love instantly. That's a myth people tell when they're too impatient to build something honest. What we built was slower, smaller, like a house made of stone instead of glass. Weeks passed, then months. I stopped checking the headlines, stopped refreshing old accounts. I let Kendra fade, not out of bitterness, but because that chapter had been fully written. She never responded to the letter. I think she understood there was nothing left to say. And Trent, last I heard, he stepped down to focus on personal matters. A vague LinkedIn post buried under hollow applause. No one ever found the full files I kept. I deleted them one morning in November, while the sun poured through the window and Ellie was humming to herself in the kitchen. I watched the progress bar fill, and for the first time in years, I felt weightless. Not because I got revenge, not because I proved anything, but because I finally chose myself. This story didn't end in fire. It ended in breath, in simplicity, in knowing that walking away doesn't make you weak. Sometimes it's the bravest damn thing you can do. To anyone reading this, to anyone who's ever felt erased, overlooked, manipulated, I want you to know something. You don't have to set the world on fire to reclaim your life. You just have to stop handing them the matches. I'm still here. And this time, I'm not disappearing.